Tar Heel furniture? Okay, and most of you didn't seem to have any significant difficulty with that. And several of you actually emailed me and said you had done, there was at least one other, Andy, you were one of them, one other problem in that chapter, was it 19 or something like that? There was another, you found a 3x5 scrap of paper, recreate the last 10 years financial statements. Having sent you, you guys all got the instructor's manual, right? You remember, don't sell that to anybody. But if you look in there, if you have any questions about that kind of Tar Heel thing, there are other examples very similar to Tar Heel, and the answers are in that instructor's manual if that gave you any kind of fix. Anything else in 3? Yeah.
Are you going to have the problem we did, something like the problem we did in class, the problem from the test?
Which, part 1? Yeah. Would I do something like that on the test? Maybe, but remember, we've got 3 hours or thereabouts to get this whole thing done. So it's very unlikely that I would give you a full-blown problem like that. Now, I have in the past. As a matter of fact, one of the tests I think I posted up there says do Tar Heel. Okay? But I think, and I don't remember right now, it is probably shorter than the other one in other areas, and it may not be shorter in terms of the number of questions. Some of the questions are much more time-consuming than others, so the absolute number of questions is not typically an indication of how difficult the test is, so don't get lulled into that if you're prone to do that. But I probably, on this test, will not ask you to do something like Tar Heel or one of its derivatives. Actually, the test is made up, so I'll fess up. I will not ask you to do this. I can't keep it straight. I told you I had a big mouth, and the test is typically made up when I get here, so these are generally good to attend. What else in 3, if anything? I'm coming up short here, but I may not remember it as well as you do. So you're looking at it in an entirely different way. We okay on 3?
So basically, maybe there will be a question that will require us to like interpret some of it.
Yeah, there will be stuff from chapter 3, okay, and so you need to be able to interpret financial statements, okay, and understand the ratios, their limitations, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
So pretty much what that would be, you'd like give us an industry average and give us like the numbers to compute for another company and be like,
Yeah, I could do that. Again, that would require you to interpret what you just did as opposed to just having done it.
okay.
Yeah. And you'll find in the chapter 4 or 5 stuff too. I have a tendency to do a lot of that. That's where we get in, as you noticed on the test, into the story problems, as you used to call them. So be aware of that. You know, it's not just here are the numbers, tell me how to get from point A to point B. Again, I have a very bright 7-year-old grandson who could do some of that. So I want you to do much more than that. Most of you are not going to have any significant difficulty on this test. I will tell you the average, it'll be an unusual test, although it's less unusual now that I've posted the samples. The average on a first test in this class has a tendency to be in the low to mid 80s, with a standard deviation of about 15 percentage points. So some of you will look at this test and think, well, I've never seen anything like this, and that's true. Okay, but you'll get used to it very easily. This class does generate a few C's every semester, but nowhere near what it could. You'll find that almost all of you will do substantially better on the second test than you do on the first, and some of you will just kick ass on the first one too, if it's typical. You know, because that standard deviation, that means there are a bunch of people up in the mid to high 90s too. But it has a tendency to be a very wide distribution on the first test. Don't let that panic you. If you come in here Wednesday and this test doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before, and maybe it does. Maybe the sample tests don't look all that unusual to you. But if it does look a bit bizarre, don't panic. First of all, you can do what with the first test if you bomb it completely? Drop it. You drop it. Okay, so you know, and inevitably people do much better on the second one. The third one is comprehensive. And the third test, by the way, just to put your mind at ease at least a little bit before the first one, I will require you to do about 5 questions, and it'll be out of the last third of the class on which you will not have been tested yet. And then you're going to get to pick the other 5 questions that you answer out of a 15, maybe, sometimes 20. It depends on how much I like to type. Okay, so the final is set up for any of you who are really, really having a hell of a hard time in here to at least get to the point where you survive the class. Because this class has given people who are not numerically oriented trouble, and we're just barely hitting the numbers. I understand that. We're going to go on and on and on, and from now on, it is, there is no, it's just nothing but numerical analysis of one kind or another. So. Chapter 5, what's the big stuff in there? Well, future and present value of individual amounts of money, future and present value of annuities, the ability to find an interest rate for an individual amount of money if I give you the beginning point and the ending point and the number of years it takes to get from the beginning to the ending points, right? It's the basis for a whole bunch of things we're going to do from now on, folks. We're going to launch into next week the chapter on bond and preferred stock valuation. You will see we beat present value mathematics to death. And then we're going to do it for stocks, common stocks, and guess what? And then we're going to do it for Chapter 9 is going to be the only true break you get from present value, future value stuff for a while. The Chapter 9 is going to go right back into accounting stuff, where we're going to try and figure out appropriate cash flows for project analysis. So all of what we do, or all of what we did in Chapter 5, will recur again and again and again. So if you don't have a good handle on 5, even if you don't have a good handle on it, it doesn't show up until after this first test. Make sure going forward that you acquire that handle, okay, because it's not going away by any stretch of the imagination. You'll find, by the way, after we get out of this, that we do a lot more with present values than future values. But we'll hit both of them as we go forward. Any questions about Chapter 5? We're okay there? Remember, you have got to show me an appropriate setup to get any credit whatsoever. Okay, understand the right answer and the wrong setup is worth nothing. Have I made that clear? I think I probably have. I usually do have to beat that to death. This is the one and only shot you're going to have in this program, probably in any significant mathematical analysis, where you actually have to understand the relationships in an equation. And I refuse to give up on that. Call me old school, but somewhere in there you got to get some math, particularly since we don't require that you have calculus before you get this. But again, I think I asked, right, 50, 60, 70, 80% of you had already have had calculus somewhere along the way. So I don't know why we don't require it. Anything in Chapter 5 we need to chat about before we get to the exams, or anything else you want to do? We okay there? Yes, ma'am.
Did you talk about effective rate calculations?
No, we did not. All that is basically is looking at, say, a rate of return compounded. You know, we've talked about annual compounding, doing it semi-annually, doing it quarterly, doing it monthly, doing it whatever. I don't generally do that because I assume most of you understand that the more often something compounds, the better off you are on the receiving end and could actually do that. If you'd like me to show you that, I'd be happy to. It will not be on the exam because we did not cover it in class. But it's actually in your book, isn't it? They probably use like a 6 or 12% rate of return that's easily divisible by 12 eventually, and 3 and 4. And you can see, what was the rate they used in the text? Is it 12? 12 is my favorite because it's divisible by 3, 4, and 12. So you can go quarterly, monthly, and semi-annually, or 3, 6, and 12. Is that what they used? 12% maybe? Okay, this obviously made a hell of an impression on all of you. At any rate, if you find out that the more, you can actually take an example I typically use, I take 12% rate of return. That never changes, but as you increase number of compounding periods, it becomes a return in effective rate closer to 13 than it is 12. Do you remember when Jason was talking about trying to get the people in the military to realize they had a 10% savings account? And the one guy said, well, it's really not 10%, it's 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. Didn't realize that's a whole lot better than 10%. Do you remember what we did there? It's a 10% rate of return for a year, but it's actually compounded quarterly. So we took 1.025, we divided the 10% rate by 4 to recognize the 4 compounding periods per year, and then we took the power that we were raising it to, and you multiply that times 4, right? Because in 1 year you have 4 quarterly compounding periods, and I think if my memory serves me correctly, we came up with what, 10.38% or something. That's exactly what it is. So we actually did do it, but it's still not going to be on the test. Okay. And that, by the way,